Well, about a month ago I started seeing drops of oil on the garage floor. Got underneath, looked right above the oil drop, and there's oil on my transmission housing, and I'm thinking, oh man, seal bad in there, that's gonna be trouble. Then I started looking around and there's the oil blowback on the oil pan. So I'm thinking, oh no, maybe it's just an oil pan seal. And then I start looking around some more, and there's oil streaks coming down on the block. So get on my friend Google. Pretty commonplace is either going to be the upper oil pan seal, which is what I'm showing you here, or the valve covers, the gasket on the valve cover. So what I'm going to do is just replace the gaskets on the valve covers and the oil pan as well. They're all pretty cheap. May as well just hit them all, and hopefully the oil droplets go away. So there's lots of videos out there on how to replace valve cover gaskets on these Jeeps and oil pan gaskets, and these are one of the more popular gaskets that I've come across, these Felpros. They're blue in color. They're really pretty solid, sturdy I should say. They're not solid, they're flexible. And they come with these O-rings as well, these grommets that go on the bolts for the valve covers. So I'll put a link to the ones that I bought in the description, so you can at least take a look at what I bought and go from there. So this is the passenger side valve cover, and it's pretty hard to see, but if I can get it down there. But it does look like there might be some indications of oil leaking across right around in this area. So I'm gonna go ahead and try the passenger side valve cover first. I'll do them both, of course. Now these are supposed to be pretty straightforward. Just simply remove the bolts on the valve cover and all the other stuff that's attached to the valve cover, and it should come right off. We'll have to see how it goes. Of course, there's no simple with anything with these Jeeps. You gotta dig everything out. So the first thing that I came across was this really nice plastic wire guide for your spark plug wires that's mounted to the top of the valve cover. And really the only way to get access to the valve cover bolts is to first take this plastic guide off. So there's 3 clips. One of them you can see I broke, but these other 2 flip up and pull the wires out of the tray, and this just lifts off the bolts of the valve cover. So if you can, took a little bit of wiggling, but it came out pretty easily. And obviously be careful with it. Mine Jeep's 9 years old, so the plastic's a little bit old, and it was easy to break this one end. So just be mindful of that. And remember how it's laid out so you can put it back when we're done. So I have access to all the bolts now, and you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4 of them are bolts like this. They're screws like that. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, no, 5 of them are these nuts that are sitting on longer threads so that these guides can go on top of them. What that means is that you need to have a deep well socket to be able to get to these, and I'm using a 5/16 socket to get to these. And you're also going to want a universal joint, because these in the back are going to be a bit of a pain to get to, but should be a simple matter of pulling these off, and the valve cover should just come right off. Once you get access to all the valve cover bolts, it looks like some of these are nuts you have to remove, and it looks like some of them are screws or bolts that you have to remove, but it's actually not the case. These are actually bolts as well that just have longer threads on the top, so that those connector, things that hold the hoses in place can slide on top of. But these are captive fasteners, so you don't have to worry about losing them down in the engine. So just I recommend you do this first one to get an idea of what it feels like, because it's easily accessible right here on the front. And once you get an idea of what it feels like, go ahead and use your universal joint to get the ones in the back. Loosen everything up, and the valve cover should come right off, and you're gonna have to snake it out of there. So let's face it, I am always skeptical when I say I'm gonna just take this off and just slide it out. But that's really what happened. Loosen up all the bolts. A couple of the ones in the back I didn't get fully loose the first time, but you can tell right away when you try to pull up on it. It stuck a little bit, but not too bad. Just a little bit of force to pull it up off, and you can see there's oil here on the outboard side of the valve cover where it seals. So if we back up here and look at the valve cover itself, the top of the frame is the side that seals on that outboard side, and there's oil all the way across the seal beads. So I'll take the seal off and put the new seal on, but this one looks like it definitely was leaking. And, you can see even there's some oil on the bolt head, on the bottom of the bolts, these three, and not on the opposite side. The focus isn't really good because of the lighting, but there's no oil on the back side. So I think we can definitively say that's where the oil is coming from. At least one place. I'm still gonna go with the plan, but this is a good sign as far as trying to fix the leak. All right, so I've got the new gasket on. It presses in a perfect fit, as you can see. I have replaced the grommets on the bolts, and the way you do that is you just take a flathead screwdriver and pry the old ones off, and then press the new ones in. It's pretty straightforward. Just make sure that the orientation that you put them in matches how they came off, because you can see one end has this little lip on it. And the bolts are actually are indeed captive to the valve cover. More specifically, they're captive to the gasket. So when you press the gasket in, and then you go to put the bolts in, you actually have to press the bottom of the bolt, the little metal flat piece there, through the gasket, and that's what keeps the bolts captive and helps secure the gasket in place and everything. So you got to press the new grommet onto the bolt, and then you press the bolt in into the gasket, and that takes a little bit of thumb muscle, but not a big deal. Once you do the first one, it's a piece of cake. Just make sure you get all the bolts back in the right spot from where you pulled them out from. All right, so honestly, putting it back together was pretty straightforward. It slips in pretty well, and put the bolts in, torque them to 105 inch-pounds. I would recommend starting in the middle with these two smaller ones just to get everything seated, and then I did these middle 4, and then did the outboard 4, kind of going in a star pattern. Get them snug first, and then torque them down. The hardest part of putting this all back together, to be honest, is this stupid plastic raceway that the spark plug wires sit on top of. The little bridges that clamp down across them to hold them tight, yeah, all of those broke while I was wrestling with this thing. The biggest pain was this number 1 wire, just getting it to go over top of everything and sit in there. But just be patient, and if that's the hardest part of this whole job, I guess I really can't complain. And assuming that it all runs fine when I start it up, that'll be one valve cover down, and the other one should be pretty straightforward, just doing it on the other side. So it looks like there's going to be some different equipment to take off, more bolts to unbolt, and I don't know, down in there somewhere, probably a valve cover. We'll find out. When you remove the ignition pack, one thing that I discovered is that it makes life a lot easier if you disconnect the 3 spark plug wires coming from the other side of the engine, and disconnect this electrical connector as well. And that way you can shove them in the back and fold the ignition pack down out of the way. One piece of advice is to make sure you note which plug wire goes to which port on the pack. So what I did, the gray one, the bottom, that's easy. I put a zip tie on this middle one, so then I knew the zip tie went in the middle, and then the one that's black by itself goes on the top. So just Little tip there to help make access a lot easier with the valve cover being way back down here. Okay, so firstly we've got two 10mm bolts that we take out of this. So you need your 10mm socket, and just move it out of the way so we can find the valve cover. And then we're going to have this plate to take off of the manifold, so we can get to the valve cover. And then we'll have the air hose, the breather hose here for the PCV valve, and then also the bracket here that mounts the alternator. And of course, just to be difficult, these 4 bolts are 1/2 inch. There's actually 5 bolts. Let's see, no, these 4 bolts. And then I'm not sure, might have to take this one off as well. That's also 1/2 inch. Getting this valve cover off was on the driver's side more complicated than on the passenger side. One thing is it was sealed better, so I actually had to use a screwdriver and pry up a little bit on the cover to release the vacuum, and although it came up okay, but definitely more work to get at the bolts, but the process is basically the same. So here's the passenger side gasket, and it broke in a few different places when I pulled it out, and then the driver's side gasket was pretty brittle as well, so I'm glad I went ahead and did both. Driver's side, basic process is the same. It's a little bit more challenging to get all the ignition equipment off of the valve cover, but once you do that, get the cover off, replace the gasket, it's all pretty much the same process. I'm gonna go start it up and make sure it runs all right, and hopefully no more drips, but we'll see. So hopefully you found this video useful, and if you did, you can feel free to hit like or subscribe to my channel. Every time I post a video, I try to add some content that I maybe didn't find in any of the other YouTube videos out there to try to help people out just a little bit more, add some useful content. So appreciate your comments, and everything that I got as far as parts and tools should be in the description below, so hopefully this is helpful. Good luck with your Jeeping.